Okay. And I am actually, so students, please, in the chat, record your name and your instructor's name. John is going to want to talk to you. So do you want them unmuted or to unmute as they answer? Does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're in like a distraction-free environment, you could just keep yourself off of mute.
And have a pencil and paper handy as well, so if you have to run and get that really quickly.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm gonna let, I could certainly lecture the entire time, but in my experience, people learn from engaging with material in meaningful ways. So it's very typical for, for somebody to be in a math class, for example, and to be sitting there and watching the professor do problems on the board and to understand everything that they're seeing somebody else do. And you could even understand it. And I wonder if this has ever happened to anybody on the line. Like if you completely understood it when the teacher was putting it on the board, and then you go home and open up your textbook and try a problem yourself. And it's like, what happened? I understood it when I was watching the teacher do it. And you really believe that you got it. But the truth is, maybe you never tried to do it yourself. And even if you understand something that you watch somebody else do, that doesn't mean that you could necessarily do it, right? So anyway, you guys ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Laura's right. Like I'm so used to seeing people's faces and so used to seeing their facial expressions and reacting to that it's been like a tough transition for me, but to do this all online because everyone turns their videos off and I can't see anybody. And it's weird. It's very strange, right? So anyway, I guess I'll like get started here. And well, this is what I'm going to talk about. And it is being recorded. So, we could always go back and watch it again, or if people aren't here, right? So I want to make sure that everybody knows this is just a simple overview of like what I'm going to talk about here and kind of what I'd like in a perfect world. Like I want people to know what math anxiety is, right? And I have this little survey that I've seen bouncing around for the last decade or so in different counseling centers across the country, different universities. It's just like, do you have math anxiety? Quick little survey for you to take. And it's more of a reflection, to get you to think about, how bad it is for you, right? Like how terrible is your level of math anxiety? And I always make a point to talk about students' perceptions of mathematics, like what people think it is and what it really is, and sometimes they're the same. People have a realistic perception of what mathematics is, but many times I fear people are so disconnected from mathematics that they don't even know what it is anymore. So I want to make sure that our perceptions are aligned with reality when it comes to the field of mathematics. I want to talk about like, what are some symptoms of math anxiety? Like, it's real, okay? I see students shaking and sweating and getting really nervous. And I just want you to be aware if you're experiencing a symptom of math anxiety and to talk a little bit about where does the math anxiety come from? So that's what I mean when I say what are the symptoms and sources. I mean, like, what does math anxiety look like when you experience it? And where does it come from, right? Like, what are the sources of that anxiety for any given individual? Of course, it wouldn't be a good presentation on math anxiety if we didn't talk about how to overcome it, right? And in general, I just put that last bullet point there. I hope that we could have a discussion. I could easily lecture about this, but I think it'll be more meaningful to everybody on the line if you interact with me and we have a conversation and a discussion. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Somebody said yes. That's a good start, right? So I'll just start like really quickly before I ask you guys to do something. I hope you have like a paper and pencil to jot down a couple numbers here in about 1 or 2 minutes. So just in general, like math anxiety it's a real thing. It's an emotional reaction, but there's also physical symptoms. Like I said, like if you're really anxious about something or stressed out, like perhaps your palms will get sweaty. Perhaps you'll shake a little bit, like whatever it is. But it's really an emotional reaction to math. And in my experience, it's based on negative past experiences that people have had with math, right? So I think that's part of where it comes from, is the messages that we receive about our ability in mathematics throughout our lives. So if you've had unpleasant experiences, that could actually harm the way that you approach and learn mathematics in the future. So the silver lining is that positive experiences with learning math could actually, be a really powerful, fast vehicle for overcoming like whatever feelings you have that are detrimental to your academic achievement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool, thanks. All right, so just to kind of get the party started here, tell me if you can't see this, and I'll read them out loud, right? But there's really a couple of questions here that there's 10 of them, okay? So what I would like everybody to do is take a few minutes, right? And you can kind of see the scale up at the top, right? You read each statement. If you disagree completely, then you should write the number 0. And if you agree completely with the statement, you could write the number 4.
So John, are we saying that we're not seeing that now? I don't think.
I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, so we see the slide overcoming math anxiety.
Do you see it?
Now, sometimes what you have to do is go out of the share screen, go back into it's so weird.
No, I know. We'll just like start a new share, I guess.
I don't know why. That's happened to me too. I don't know why that happens.
No, but thanks for saying that, because I want to make sure you guys are seeing what I see.
Now we see it.
And if you don't see it, then we could do it verbally, right?
It's there.
So
I can't see it.
Everybody could see it?
Yes.
So there's 10 statements here, right? And I think can you guys still see it, right?
Yes.
So if you completely disagree, it's called like a Likert scale, right? Like if you put either the number 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. 4 means you completely agree with the statement, and 0 means you completely disagree. So if you're kind of in the middle, what number would you put?
3 or 2.
Right. If you were right in the middle, you'd probably put the number 2, right? So anyway, just to make sure people understand the directions, there's 10 questions. They're letters, right? A through J, right? What's the highest possible score if you add your responses to 10 questions that you could get on this survey?
$40.
That's right, because 4 is the top of the scale. So if you completely agree with everything and you put all 4s and there's 10 questions, the highest that you could possibly get is a 4. 40, 4 times 10, right? What about 0? What if you put 0 for everything? Then
0.
your score would be?
0.
So you kind of understand the directions. I didn't write them out explicitly, but there's 10 questions and you have to put a number for each question. And then at the end, you add up the 10 numbers and you get like a final score. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're not too shy, you could put your score in the chat box, and I just want to give you guys like a minute or two to complete this. Does that sound good?
Mhm.
Okay. So I'll just be quiet for a minute. And are you doing it too, Laura? I'll do it. I'll do it too. I'll do it with you guys. I hope I'm not uneasy going to the board in math class. That would be really, really terrible for a math teacher.
So John, you want us to put our score in the chat?
If you're confident enough to do so, and I really want people to reflect on these things. So that's part of this, is just, and put yourself out there a little bit, really try to answer honestly. But if you're totally uncomfortable, then you don't have to. But maybe somebody out there is like, comfortable enough to throw their total score in the chat box. Now, in a perfect world, I guess everybody would, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to feel bad if you don't. I fear math tests more than any other comment. No, it's clear to me. The last one just says, I'm afraid I won't be able to keep up with the rest of the class. All right. So let's see. All right, we're getting some scores in here. I do appreciate you having the confidence to put it forth, right? So Fatima, am I reading that right? Oh, okay. I was like, oh, you got an 8. Well, that's pretty low. All right, let's see. So we got how many people? 1, 2, 3, 4. Does anyone just need a little bit more time to finish? Or are we all good? Okay, so let me just take a minute and tell you what this means. Does anyone need more time for this? I mean, this is what mine looked like. So I just, my total sum for the 10 questions was just 4, right? Which is pretty good. That means I really don't have a lot of math anxiety, right? But I think I'll do some an old school table for you guys here, right? If you have your sum or your total score, right? We'll give a range, right? We'll say if you got between 30 and 40, if you got between 20 and 29, if you got between 10 and 19, so it'd really be 32, 40, 22, 29, 10 to 19, or 0 to 9, right? And what does it really mean if you were in each of those categories, for you, right? So I'll just talk about that briefly, and I do appreciate you guys putting the scores in the chat box, right? I think if you're the higher your score is, most likely if you answered honestly and everything, your levels of math anxiety would be higher if you got a higher number. on this little scale, right? So if you have like between 30 and 40, you definitely like have some, some math anxiety that very possibly, depending on the individual, right? This could be like inhibiting your performance in math class, right? Like it's something that needs to be addressed, right? So this is like a pretty high level of math anxiety. So you really want to pay attention to the strategies that I'll go over in the rest of this thing, right? I think like if you have a score between 20 and 29, like you definitely still have some math anxiety, right? But let's call it medium, right? Like it's not the end of the world. With a little bit of work, maybe you could get the math anxiety down to like a lower level, but you still should be cognizant of it because it very well may be impacting your performance in a negative way in math class, right? Now, I think if you got like 10 to 19, you may not be like as affected by it. We could call that low math anxiety if you want to, just as a quick explanation here. But you could still work on it a little bit, right? It's only going to help you if you could, bring the level down. And I would say this person, not that they have no math anxiety. Like I'm a math professor and I still had some math anxiety. I think it's like really normal. Like I get nervous sometimes when I ask other professors that I work with a math question because I'm like, oh my God, I kind of know that they know more about it than I do because I work with some really brilliant people. And it could be embarrassing even to like ask a question. It's like, hey, Politis, I thought you ran the math lab. How come you don't know the answer to this question, right? But I think like sometimes I feel that anxiety when I talk to other professors, right? Or I'm unsure of myself. I drift off sometimes when I'm doing math. Yeah, it is kind of embarrassing, right? I mean, especially like how cold mathematicians are, right? Like, no, that is incorrect, and you just shrink up into the size of a little tiny grain of sand and you just feel so small, right? But I think like you look at your score and the whole point of this is, hey, if you're high on the scale, you really got to work on it. It's a huge problem that needs to be addressed, right? You can't just ignore it, right? And if you're somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit of work could, really help you like overcome what math anxiety you have and just take that out as a contributing factor to your academic achievement in math class. And I think if you're like 0 to 9, like you're cool as a cucumber, like you don't really have too much math anxiety, but it could always change, right? I feared math until I met Professor Bennett and I got an A. Let's see, he diagnosed you with math anxiety. I see. So when it comes to that, is it Yeshiba?
Yes, that's correct.
So can I just ask you a quick question? Like you got some success in your 118 class, right?
Definitely so.
And how did that feel and what impact did it have on your math anxiety?
It was just my approach. Like every time I just got so afraid. I just felt so intimidated. I didn't know what to do. And Professor Bennett was like, you answer all the questions in class, but then you don't test well. And I'm like, I don't know why I freeze or I get anxious. And he was like, calm down. And this is what you do. Just tell yourself that you can do it. Just remember the rules. And my whole approach was completely different.
So do you think, like, my experiences, and I'm so glad that you're the leader that's starting the discussion, because we're moving into this phase where I really want to hear from you and the other students on the line. And we could do it in a discussion format, like talking, or you could just type your answers into the chat box, whatever you prefer. Mm-hmm. But I'm feeling like people need to feel success in math. You can't just keep getting like beaten down over and over and over. Like a lot of times a student, by the way, like my name's John Politis. I work at CCP. I run the math lab. I got all, this little small army of math tutors. I tutor people in math all day, either in class or one-on-one in small groups. And I feel like students come in and they ask me to do the hardest problem when they come to seek for tutoring, right? And I always put the brakes on and I go back to like an easier problem and make sure that the student could do the easy one, right? Like walk before you run. And I'm totally thinking I want people to feel success, right? If you start with the hardest problem and you already have math anxiety, it could just make you feel worse because you can't get it. You got to like build up to it, right? Anyway, I know Yeshiba is going to join this conversation, but I have some, let's call them go around questions. And this has to do with how you perceive mathematics, like in your own mind, right? So it's a lot of opinion and from your own experience. But the first, let's say, question that I have for people on the line is I just want to go around and what's your definition of mathematics? Like, how would you define math?
I would define math. Oh, you want us to write it? I'm sorry.
No, we could speak it. Let's talk.
I think math is everything. Even you go to the grocery store, you're like, okay, if grapes are $1.99 per pound, we could get 2 pounds. It's in every single thing that you do. You're buying gas, like you can't escape it. It's around us. It's everywhere. That's my perspective of math.
Okay. So what's the definition of math? Like, what is it? Like, it could be everywhere, but what is it?
Problem solving.
I like that. I think that's a big part of it. Developing effective strategies to solve a problem.
Yes, correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's like at the heart of it. Well, what about you, Fatima? What do you think?
Maybe numbers, like biology, math, everything, statistic.
There's definitely numbers in math, but would you believe that it's not all numbers? That there's like a lot of math that's done with no numbers? Would you believe that if I told you that?
Yes.
You would. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, like, I think obviously numbers has a lot to do with it. There's the everyday mathematics that Yeshiva talked about, right? Just like, do you know how to like balance your checkbook, or do you know like what your interest rate is on your credit cards and what that means? And like, it goes on and on and on. And it's definitely everywhere. Like, I'll give you a health example. MIT researchers recently wrote an algorithm. It was mathematicians and computer programmers, some of the same people. Usually, math will become increasingly relevant in our lives moving forward. And here's a good example. These mathematicians wrote a computer program that could listen to somebody cough. And with 99% accuracy, they could diagnose the person with COVID, even if they're asymptomatic. Just as an example, it's a cough that doctors can't hear. The cough that like humans just, it's inaudible to us. But if the person coughs, the computer program could say with more accuracy than the tests that they're giving right now, whether the person has COVID or not. And it was a mathematician that wrote that. And I think like as innovation continues, people will begin to realize, right, that math is just a part of a lot of, especially in the digital age and all of the computer programming that's going on these days, right? But 2 more people, you got anything to add to the definition of math? Sam and Ray?
Yeah, hi. I was gonna say that I do define mathematics like it's a umbrella, and it covers like critical thinking and problem solving, and it's like an interchangeable skill. You know what I'm saying? So like every time a problem presents to you, you gotta take a second to gather the facts, and to how to more along the lines of creating a plan of how to approach.
I like you, man. Why aren't you in my class? No, that's really good. Even when you said the word umbrella, it made me like think of building on that just like a little bit. And I think like what students see is very narrow. Like it's almost like pigeonholing like a huge, amazing field. People don't even get exposed to all the different branches of mathematics. Like people think that it's like algebra and that's it, because that's all that they see. But the truth is, it's like this huge umbrella of interconnected ideas. And it's amazing. It's like this huge universe of just connections between all these different things. So when you said umbrella, it just made me think of how big it is and how little of it is shown to people in school.
Right. I did learn that in high school. We was taking a course of statistics, and we learned how different real world problem solving, you know, like you said, interest rates and principles, and a lot of these terminology that really would scare people and create anxiety.
Absolutely. But it's also important when it comes to like money, like, and things like, it's just like everyday life. Like there is a difference between people that understand like that kind of stuff, like interest rates and bank accounts and the stock markets and, you know, ETFs and, you know, whatever it is, like, and the people that just are afraid of that and don't get involved in it at all, or they let somebody else do it for them. Kind of scary. Like just blindly trust some stranger with all your money, right? It's kind of terrifying, right?
It sounds you touched a topic that's a little bit personal, because I am trying to step myself into the stock market, and I'm also trying to repair credit. So it's like these terms they're relevant. They're really relevant to life.
Big time, you know? Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now this one might be a little faster, right? I think defining math is actually really hard. Like I went around and asked like all these professors I work with, you know, just to hear what they would say, you know, like over the last couple of years. And it's really interesting what people say, you know. But anyway, this next one's like really quick one, right? Just like, what do you like or dislike about math? And it would be great to just hear from everybody, just like a real quick thing.
Something I dislike about math, even though it could be seen as a good thing, it's flexibility, and it's so many ways to approach a single problem. Like we're learning how to factor polynomials, and it's just really different approaches of how to dissect the problem. You got to really understand what they're asking instead of evaluate, simplify, things of that sort.
I just feel like you should do the rest of the presentation. I think, you know, you sound great, man. You know, I mean, like some of the things that you're saying and others have said, like, are on the next few slides. So I always like to just see how in tune the students are with what I'm thinking. And so far it sounds good, man. Well, who else? What do you like or dislike about math? Let's hear it.
What I love is like solving problems. Because then I'm such an overthinker. And then when I get it, I'm like, that's it. And you're like, oh, and you see where you went wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and you got it. The feeling that you get is the greatest. Just knowing that, okay, I've solved it. And, you know, next time, don't do this or don't do that. So it's a great feeling.
It feels good when you solve a hard problem. Like I'll have students, like sometimes I'll write a problem on the board and everyone will be quiet, you know, they're writing on their papers, you know, presumably thinking, right? And then all of a sudden a student will go, yes! And they'll put their arms in the air like that, or sometimes people actually are like, woohoo! Like there's this exclamation of just total joy when they solve the problem. And I started thinking over the years, like, what other field does that happen in? Like I see it happen in math class and that's what I mean about feeling the success. It could be really empowering to like feel success in math. Like, it feels good, you know, especially because it has this reputation of being all hard and everything. When you feel accomplished in it, it's incredibly empowering. So I do appreciate what you all are saying. Like, that just sent like shivers down my spine when you said that. So, but what about the others? What do you like or dislike?
I would say I do like essential like accomplishment that you said.
Okay. What about you, Fatima? Was that you that said it, or Yashiba? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's me. So I like to solve the problem, but sometimes when it's getting harder, so I start to hating the math.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I look at it like it really is a test of like an individual, right? Like, when you step up and something is hard, like, what do you do? Like, as a person, right? Like, if it's hard, that doesn't mean that's not bad necessarily. Maybe it's an opportunity to be able to do more, like yourself, like challenge, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to run away from it. You want to rise to it, right? Like, it's okay if it's hard, right? Like, it's good that it's hard. In fact, when I look at the whole layout, right? It's obvious to me that some courses are, you know, generally speaking, right? It depends on the professor you get. You could have the same exact course, two different professors, two different courses, if you know what I mean, right? It could be totally different. But when I look at rigor in general, like across the curriculum, not just K through 12, but even at CCP or in the university scene now, it's like, what are the courses that are truly rigorous, you know, versus the ones that are like, I just kind of showed up to my underwater basket weaving class and smiled, and I didn't have to think too much, and I got an A. I mean, like, how much is that A really worth, right? So anyway, what does it take to be successful in a math course? Let's hear it.
You never stop. You have to keep going. You never ever stop. And when it gets tougher, it just makes you try harder, and it just makes you that much stronger, because you're like, I'm going to get this. Because you want that feeling and you want that joy when you know, oh my gosh, I solved it. And you practice and you practice and you get better.
I mean, isn't that life?
Yes.
Like, math is not separate from life, despite what people may believe, right? It's like, that's just how you learn how to do things, how to do more things, bigger things, badder things, whatever, right? You want, as you grow as an academic, you want to be able to handle more. You want the problems to get more complicated, and you want to have the tools to deal with them. Well, what else? This is fantastic. You guys are I don't even have anything else to talk about by the time you guys are done. No, I do.
When I really got back into math, when I was doing 118, I really had the confidence to do statistics, not for 15 weeks, but I did it in the summer, and I amazed myself. I'm like, I just came out of 118. I am so ready for statistics. And I did that in the summer. I got a B, but I was extremely proud. It was laborious, it's tough, and a B is like an A to me, so I'm grateful. I worked hard.
Yeah, I think like some people say that the culture we have is everybody wins, everybody gets a trophy, right? Like, a B means something. You don't have to be ashamed of like getting a B, you know, like it's like, I mean, maybe you'll take it again and get an A. I don't know, but it's like some courses truly are difficult, and if you get a B, it actually means that you understand the majority of the material.
Correct.
And maybe you just missed one or two things.
I want to piggyback off of that. It may be irrelevant, but I did take a course in American Sign Language in 2015, and I was still in high school, and it was a really transitional. Um, it was a culture change. We had when we entered the class, we couldn't speak. We had to respect the deaf instructor by not talking, being on our phones, and those type of things. And throughout the course of the summer, the grade that I developed was a C. and I worked really hard for a higher grade. You know, we did we did a video with a partner and I where we had a signed conversation, and I felt like I had the confidence and everything went great, but I got a C and I was proud, but I think I deserved some more. But it was a hard fought C, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, I mean, look, when you look at, there's two different things, right? There's like your GPA and getting a degree, and then there's learning. And unfortunately, in the modern age, they're not the same thing. You know, like in other words, just because you get an A, that doesn't mean you learned anything necessarily. Right? And if you get a C, that doesn't mean you didn't learn. Right? Anyway, like grades are in one way or another arbitrary in many instances. It doesn't necessarily speak to how much an individual learned per se.
Yes.
You know? So anybody else got anything on that? Because now I'm like, I was like, man, nobody's going to talk. It's just going to be me lecturing. But man, you guys it's great, the participation. And this is what I mean about a smaller group. You know, it's sometimes good, you know, and something like this, like we only got a couple people, we could really get into it a little bit in the short amount of time we have. So for the last one, if anybody has something here, like, do you avoid studying math? Like, and what I mean by that, there's like this weird connection between like math anxiety and math avoidance. Like if people, they tend to like kind of feed into each other. Like if you're really stressed out about math, then maybe you won't register for math this semester. You'll wait till next semester. You'll just like put it off and maybe try to cram the night before a test and not study at all except for the night before. And then you go in and you're feeling all anxious and everything because you avoided it. And then you get a bad grade and then you just get more math anxiety and then you avoid it more. And it's like this vicious biconditional implication or cycle in this case, right? So anyway, do you guys avoid it? Like, be honest.
No.
Okay.
No, I like math.
Okay. Me too. I like
I
math.
like to study. I like to like go on the example and keep practicing, but sometimes.
Just some food for thought, you know, like people, there's this connection that I see between like anxiety and avoidance that like, and I just want people to be aware of it. Like if you avoid it, it's not going to help your anxiety about it. Like you actually have to engage with it and just kind of get over it, you know, like if you're afraid of it, you got to start practicing, got to start feeling that success, and things like tend to get better. So I could talk for a minute because I want to get to some of the ideas that I want you to leave with and think about. So just talking about symptoms of math anxiety, just like what it looks like. You know, obviously exams are a big source of stress. People freak out when they have a math test, right? A lot of students say, again, like I know we said this earlier, but you understand things when you're in class. You totally get it. And then students leave and they're like, yeah, I got this. I understand it completely. But then you go home and you open up the textbook to do your homework or the test gets in front of you and your mind just goes blank, right? A lot of people say that they understood it perfectly. And then when they get the test, they just go blank, right? So feeling prepared, and this could be like a sense of false security. Like people believe that they understand something deeply just because they watched somebody else do it and understood an example problem. And they truly didn't do like enough independent practice themselves over and over and over and over. Like I think it was Fatima before that said, or somebody, practice, practice, practice. Just keep going, just keep trying, you know? And a lot of people say they perform well in every other class. I got an A in my poetry class. It's just that darn math class, right? So like
This
when it,
starting to
oh,
sound a
go
little
ahead,
bit-
go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it just starting to sound a little bit personal. That's basically me. I really do feel prepared, but then one incident happened where I completely flunked the test. I'm like, how? How?
Like sometimes I get nervous, and this is what I mean. Like I no, like not pointing the finger at you or anybody else, but people believe that they really have mastered something, and like they really believe it, and then it's like this punch in the face when you get your test back, and it's like, I really thought I understood it. There's always the first student to turn in their exam, right? Like after 20 minutes, and it's an hour-long test. They have this big smile on their face and they walk up, and I'm like, are you sure you're done? You know, like this is, you have an hour and only 15, and they're like, no, I got this, I'm done. It always makes me a little nervous, and I'm like, okay, are you sure? And sometimes I'm like, sit back down and check every project, just take the test again. You know, sometimes that student really believes that they like did well, and it's like a shock to them. I don't know if it's denial or if it's just kind of thinking that you understand something because you saw a few examples and totally got it, but you didn't like do enough independent practice, kind of coming at the same concept from different angles and kind of tying it all together, if that makes sense. So like just the math avoidance symptom, right? Skipping class, right? The numbers tend to go down if you're a math professor. Like on the first day, there's 36 people in the room, everything's cool, everyone's smiling and everything. And then like around this time, you know, I look out and it's like, oh, there's only 20 now. What happened to the other 16 people, you know? And it's like, maybe they're feeling bad and just avoiding it, just whatever. But people skip class. They really don't read math textbooks. Like, let's be honest. Like, especially now, many people do not access information when it comes to math from a book, right? A lot of people, and I'm just being responsive to what I see in the student community. Like people watch YouTube videos. They go to Khan Academy. And when it comes to like, and I ask people every day, like, did you read the book? And they're like, oh, no, I don't like that book. Okay, well, like you don't have to like it, but you should learn how to like read it, you know, and learn how to, and it is hard. It takes a long time when you look at like math notations. Like it could just be like one line and it could take an hour to figure out what it means, you know. It's intimidating. And I think people in the instant gratification culture, it's really hard to actually sit down and, you know, hit the books. And right, people try to fool themselves and they cram the night before the test. That's a bad idea. You really can't cram in a math class. It just doesn't work, right? In my experience, after, you know, a couple thousand students or whatever, it's like, it just doesn't work when people just put it off. You really have to do it every day, even if it's a little bit. I'm not saying you have to do it for 5 hours a day, but if you try to teach yourself 3 chapters in one night, you're probably setting yourself up for, you know, a little bit more anxiety, right? People postpone enrollment in math classes and they choose majors just to avoid taking a math class. Now, this is amazing to me because I think now people are making lifelong decisions just based on avoiding math. Kind of crazy, right? Like if you're 20 years old, you might be working at the same job for 40 or 50 years, right? And you're going to let like a 15-week math class like change your whole trajectory of your life and your career path, right? So somebody mentioned, like, this is another symptom, I'd say, like the way people rationalize, right? Men are better at math than women. That's a big myth that I hear. It's absolutely not true, right? I think this one's starting to kind of bleed out, but, you know, in decades past, this was like, you know, a lot of people believed this or said this. Somebody mentioned this before, that there's one way to complete a math problem. False. And I think that that's really hard for people because students are like, just tell me how to do it. step 1, step 2, step 3, and then I just memorized this procedure and I could solve every math problem. That's a fantasy, right? There's many ways that you could solve the same math problem. And I think if you really understand something, you could actually present it in different ways. That's how you could tell if you get a good math teacher or not. Ask them to explain the same thing in a different way. And if they can't do it, then they're just reiterating the procedure that they learned. And they really may not understand it deeply themselves. There's many ways to solve it. And if you really understand something and you're given, let's say, examples of effective strategies, you might even be able to develop your own effective strategy. It has to be effective, right? And another one is like, I'm just a math person, or I'm not a math person. People say that all the time. I'm just not a math person. You have to have a mathematical mind, like it's some magic or something. If you're, and this just, I mean, look, some people are better at math than others, right? We can't say everybody has the same ability in math, because obviously some people are better than others. But I think everybody could learn it, right? And there's really no such thing as having like a mathematical mind or having a non-mathematical mind, right? Like everybody could get better at it. And I don't want to lecture too much about this, so because I really want to get to these last couple things and see if you guys have any closing thoughts. An hour goes fast, doesn't it? Time flies when you're having fun. But I think like this is just where it comes from, the sources of math anxiety. You receive messages that you can't be successful. Your teacher gives you the C. Your teacher gives you an F. You fail a class. You get that exam back and it's just a low score, whatever. And you just get these messages that you're just not good at it, right? And people internalize it and they carry it with them. The United States doesn't have a healthy math culture. Let me just say it, okay? The culture of math in the United States is very strange when you compare it to other places in the world. And I think that, you know, teachers say it, parents say it. I can't tell you how many parents that I met when I was a high school teacher, and they just straight up told me, I can't help my kid with their homework. I don't know what to do because I can't help them with it. And I think kids hear it. They hear, my mom's not good at math. My English teacher said she was never good at math. And there's just, I was looking for a video to show you guys during this thing. And I type in math anxiety, I'm looking at all these YouTube videos and I'm like, I can't show, like all this stuff is crap. You know, I don't want to show it to anybody because all of it's like, ooh, math is really scary. And like, and all this stuff is just like pervades our culture, that math is like this terrifying thing. It's okay to not be good at it. And just, it's fine. You know, don't worry about math, you know, and it's just like this reinforcing thing that doesn't help somebody like me, you know, do his job. Right. So, and then we just have the basic, any source of stress. I have 5 kids. I have three part-time jobs. I'm a full-time student, right? There was a death in my family, whatever it is, right? There's all just life, right? And math sometimes could amplify, you know, the anxiety that you're already experiencing from other reasons, right? So if you want to get better, don't cram. Do math every day. And this is just the simple way to say it. Spend more time practicing independently. Prepare adequately. That means like, don't fool yourself and be like, I got this. Like really, really spend the time to be prepared. And, you know, they're kind of all connected, right? Stop talking bad about your achievement in math. People say things like, I'm bad at math. I've never been good at math. And if you could realize that you're saying those things, that's the first step to stopping it, because it'll never help. If you're like, I'm bad at this, I can't do this, that's not going to help you ever. So stop. Okay? Good talk. Build confidence through practice. We've been talking about this the whole time. You got to feel success. Start with the easy ones. Build your way up to the harder ones, right? And then if you seek help, like people don't email their math instructors. I don't know why. Like I tutor people every day and they're like, I don't understand this. I'm like, did you ask your professor? No. Why not? Why didn't you ask your professor to explain it? Like, I don't understand. But if you're a CCP student, just so you understand, in Allied Health 101, has some math in it, right? And you could always make an appointment for a tutoring session, right? With a CCP tutor, right? I got some tutors that do Allied Health 101 math specific to your class. So this is how you do that. My CCP, just in case you don't know, Student Quick Links is on the left. Expand that menu and just click schedule an online tutoring appointment. And if you have any questions outside of these simplified directions, you could email me. I'll give my email at the end. And just ask me and I'll help you to make an appointment. All right. So I guess, like, just to wrap this thing up and to give you guys some food for thought, these are just some big dichotomies in my experience. People have a certain expectation about what it takes to learn math, but the reality could be very different. People believe that they understand something that they don't understand, and they really just need to do more practice and spend more time interacting with the material. People think that math is filled with procedures, and it is. But a lot of times students say, I can't memorize everything. I can't memorize everything. Those folks are trapped in the procedures and not really going towards the concepts, right? The truth is, there are procedures in math, but there's also concepts behind the procedures. And many students only have procedures and they don't have concepts. The ones that try to memorize everything. And the truth is, you can't really have one without the other, right? You have to have both. There are the procedures, but there's also the concepts behind the procedures that in many instances are missing. Students just memorize step 1, step 2, step 3, but they don't really understand what they're doing, but they're doing it. And that's really scary. Passivity versus activity. This is just how people learn, okay? Like in a math class, a lot of people are just kind of sitting there watching, you know, the teacher do performance. And I just try to get people to put the pen to the paper, to try the problems themselves, interact with the material, right? You have to actively engage with the material if you're going to learn anything, including math. So if you're very passive and you're afraid to raise your hand, contribute to the discussion in math class, go up to the board, do a problem, challenge yourself to do those things. And maybe you'll see that you're still alive after you go up and do a problem at the board, right? And it's not that big of a deal, right? So try to move towards activity. And the last two, this is getting a little deeper for you guys, right? Just really quick. I could talk about just the last two things for hours and hours and hours. I'm starting to think that getting better at math could actually make people more independent, like we were talking about earlier with their finances, with whatever. But it could also free people from oppression. It could liberate people. And I'm starting to read some research on this that, hey, if you're a politician, not to talk too much about politicians right now, but if you're a person in power, maybe it's okay if like half of the United States, you know, doesn't really know how to add and subtract and doesn't know much about statistics and numbers. Maybe that's good if people like really don't have those skills to analyze like sets of information and to think critically the way that math teaches you to. You know why it could be good for somebody in power? Because it's really easy to fool people that can't think critically. It's really easy to trick people and manipulate them with statistics if they don't understand them. So maybe it's okay if the US curriculum in kindergarten through 12 is really not that great. Because if we could keep half the country stupid, then I could stay in power. Do you guys get what I'm saying? It could actually be liberating to understand these things more deeply. So really, you don't get tricked into being given just a snapshot of information and letting that frame your entire understanding about something. So I'll just leave you guys with that. If you want to talk especially more about the oppression liberation thing, hey, hit me up. All right. My name's John Politis. All right. There's my email address. All right. jpolitis@ccp.edu. And I hope you guys got something from it. I hope you learned something, realized something, or surprised by something. Anything?
Thank you.
That's it?
I just screenshot.
So I felt a little rust at the end. That happens to me. I wanted to like jam it all in there, right? But I should probably write a book on those big dichotomies, I think, and like hand it out to people or something. But anyway, like I tried to like, I know I lectured a lot the second half, but I just felt like I had so much I had to say. And I'm so glad you guys contributed in the first half the way that you did. And I hope you got something from it. I'm John. I love you. I'm going to go tutor somebody for my 3 o'clock appointment.
Thank you, John. Thanks,
Thank
students.
you.
How
Everybody,
was that, Laura? Any
that was
good?
good. I'm so happy I get to meet my student Ray face to face. Hey, it
Yeah.
is so nice to see faces, isn't it?
I really liked what you had to say, Ray. I really did.
Right.
And Fatima and Yeshiba, thank you for your contributions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Thank
you.
And I'll let your instructors know you're here. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank
You
you,
too.
Laura.
And I hope
Thank
I'll
you,
work with
everyone.
you again.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
Bye.